औज़ु बिल्लाहि मिनश शैतानिर रजीम। बिस्मिल्लाहिर रहमानिर रहीम। इन्नल्लाहा व मलाइकतहु युसल्लूना अलन नबी या अय्युहल्लज़ीना आमनू सल्लु अलैहि व सल्लिमू तस्लीमा। अल्लाहुम्मा सल्लि अला मुहम्मदिन व आलि मुहम्मद। बिस्मिल्लाहिर रहमानिर रहीम। अन जाबिर इब्न अब्दुल्लाह अल अंसारी अन्नहु क़ाल अन फ़ातिमत ज़हरा अलैहिस्सलाम बिन्त रसूलिल्लाह सल्लल्लाहु अलैहि व आलिहि क़ाल समिअतु फ़ातिमत अन्नहा क़ालत दख़ल अलैया अबी रसूलुल्लाह फ़ी बअज़िल अय्याम फ़क़ाल अस्सलामु अलैकी या फ़ातिमतु फ़क़ुल्तु अलैकस्सलाम क़ाल इन्नी अजिदु फ़ी बदनी ज़ुअफ़ा फ़क़ुल्तु लहु उईज़ुका बिल्लाहि या अबताहु मिनज़्ज़ुअफ़ फ़क़ाल या फ़ातिमतु इतीनी बिल्किसाइल यमानी फ़ग़त्तीनी बिहि फ़अतैतुहु बिल्किसाइल यमानी फ़ग़त्तैतुहु बिहि वसिरतु अनज़ुरु इलैहि व इज़ा वजहुहु यतलअलअु कअन्नहुल बद्रु फ़ी लैलति तमामिही व कमालिही फमा कानत इल्ला साअतन व इज़ा बिवलदिहिल हसन क़द अक़बल फ़क़ाल अस्सलामु अलैकी या उम्मह फ़क़ुल्तु व अलैकस्सलाम या क़ुर्रत ऐनी व समरत फ़ुआदी फ़क़ाल या उम्मह इन्नी अशम्मु इन्दकी राइहतन तय्यबा कअन्नहा राइहतु जद्दी रसूलिल्लाह फ़क़ुल्तु नअम इन्न जद्दक तहतल किसा फ़अक़बलल हसन नहवल किसा फ़क़ाल अस्सलामु अलैका या जद्दा या रसूलल्लाह अतअज़नु ली अन अदख़ुल मअका तहतल किसा फ़क़ाल व अलैकस्सलाम या वलदी व या साहिब हौज़ी क़द अज़िनतु लक फ़दख़ल मअहु तहतल किसा फमा कानत इल्ला साअतन व इज़ा बिवलदिहिल हुसैन क़द अक़बल व क़ाल अस्सलामु अलैकी या उम्मह फ़क़ुल्तु व अलैकस्सलाम या वलदी व या क़ुर्रत ऐनी व समरत फ़ुआदी फ़क़ाल लि या उम्मह इन्नी अशम्मु इन्दकी राइहतन तय्यबा कअन्नहा राइहतु जद्दी रसूलिल्लाह सल्लल्लाहु अलैहि व आलिहि फ़क़ुल्तु नअम इन्न जद्दक व अख़ाक तहतल किसा फ़दनल हुसैन नहवल किसा वक़ाल अस्सलामु अलैका या जद्दा अस्सलामु अलैका या मन इख्तारहुल्लाह अतअज़ुनु ली अन अकूना मअकुमा तहतल किसा फ़क़ाल व अलैकस्सलाम या वलदी व या शाफ़िअ उम्मती क़द अज़िनतु लक फ़दख़ल मअहुमा तहतल किसा फ़अक़बल इंद ज़ालिका अबुल हसन अली इब्न अबी तालिब फ़क़ाल अस्सलामु अलैकी या बिन्त रसूलिल्लाह फ़क़ुल्तु व अलैकस्सलाम या अबल हसन व या अमीरल मुअमिनीन फ़क़ाल या फ़ातिमतु इन्नी अशम्मु इन्दकी राइहतन तय्यबा कअन्नहा राइहतु अख़ी व इब्न अम्मी रसूलिल्लाह फ़क़ुल्तु नअम हा हुवा मअ वलदैका तहतल किसा फ़अक़बल अली नहवल किसा वक़ाल अस्सलामु अलैका या रसूलल्लाह अतअज़ुनु ली अन अकूना मअकुम तहतल किसा क़ाल लहु अलैकस्सलाम या अख़ी व या वसी व खलीफ़ती व साहिब लिवाई क़द अज़िनतु लक फ़दख़ल अली तहतल किसा सुम्मा अतैतु नहवल किसा फ़क़ुल्तु अस्सलामु अलैका या अबताहु या रसूलल्लाह अतअज़ुनु ली अन अकूना मअकुम तहतल किसा क़ाल व अलैकिस्सलाम या बिन्ती व या बिज़अती क़द अज़िनतु लकी फ़दख़लतु तहतल किसा फ़लम्मा इक्तमलना जमीअन तहतल किसा अख़ज़ अबी रसूलुल्लाह बितरफ़िल किसा व औमा बियदिहिल युमना इलस समा वक़ाल अल्लाहुम्मा इन्ना हाउलाई अहलु बैती व ख़ासती व हाम्मती लहमुहुम लहमी व दमुहुम दमी युअलिमुनी मा युअलिमुहुम व यहज़ुनुनी मा यहज़ुनुहुम अना हर्बु लिमन हारबहुम व सिल्मुन लिमन सालमहुम व अदुव्वुन लिमन आदाहुम व मुहिब्बुन लिमन अहब्बहुम इन्नहुम मिन्नी व अना मिनहुम वजअल सलवातिका व बरकातिका व रहमतका व गुफ़रानका व रिज़वानका अलैया व अलैहिम व अज़हिब अन्हुमुर रिजसा व तह्हिरहुम तत्हीरा। सल्लि अला मुहम्मद व आले मुहम्मद वअज्जिल फरज। फ़क़ाल अल्लाहु अज़्ज़ा व जल्ल या मलाइकती व या सुक्कान समावाती इन्नी मा खलक़्तु समाअ मबनिय्या वला अर्ज़ मदहिय्या वला क़मरन मुनीरा वला शम्सन मुज़ीआ वला फ़लकन यदूर वला बहरन यजरी वला फुल्कन यसरी इल्ला फ़ी मुहब्बति हाउलाइल ख़म्सति अल्लज़ीना हुम तहतल किसा। फ़क़ाल अल अमीन जिब्रील या रब्बि व मन तहतल किसा। फ़क़ाल अज़्ज़ व जल्ल हुम अहलु बैतिन नुबुव्वा व मअदनुर रिसाला हुम फ़ातिमतु व अबूहा व बअलुहा व बनूहा। अल्लाहुम्मा मुहम्मद व आले मुहम्मद। फ़क़ाल जिब्रील या रब्बि अतअज़नु ली अन अहबिता इलल अर्ज़ि लिअकून मअहुम सादिसा। फ़क़ाल अल्लाह नअम क़द अज़िनतु लका फ़अहबतल अमीन जिब्रील फ़क़ाल अस्सलामु अलैका या रसूलल्लाह अल अलीयुल अअला युक़रिउका अस्सलाम व यख़ुस्सुका बित्तहिय्यति वल इकराम व यक़ूलु लका व इज़्ज़ती व जलाली इन्नी मा खलक़्तु समाअन मबनिय्या वला अर्ज़ मदहिय्या वला क़मरन मुनीरा वला शम्सन मुज़ीआ वला फ़लकन यदूर वला बहरन यजरी वला फुल्कन यसरी इल्ला लिअजलिकुम व मुहब्बतिकुम व क़द अज़िन ली अन अदख़ुल मअकुम फ़हल तअज़नु ली या रसूलल्लाह। फ़क़ाल रसूलुल्लाह अलैहिस्सलाम या अमीन वहिय्यिल्लाह इन्नहु नअम क़द अज़िनतु लका। फ़दख़ल जिब्रील मअना तहतल किसा फ़क़ाल लिअबी इन्नल्लाह क़द औहा इलैकुम यक़ूल इन्नमा युरीदुल्लाहु लियुज़हिबा अन्कुमुर रिज्ज़ अहलल बैत व युत्तहिरकुम तत्हीरा। अल्लाहुम्मा सल्लि अला मुहम्मद व आले मुहम्मद। वक़ाल अली लिअबी या रसूलल्लाह अख़बिरनी मा लिजुलूसिना हाज़ा तहतल किसाइ मिनल फ़ज़्लि इंदल्लाह। फ़क़ाल अन्नबी वल्लज़ी बअसनी बिलहक़्क़ि नबिय्या वस्तफ़ानी बिर्रिसालति नजिय्या मा ज़ुकिरा ख़बरुना हाज़ा फ़ी महफ़िलिन मिन महाफ़िल अहलिल अर्ज़ व फ़ीहि जम्उन मिन शिअतिना व मुहिब्बीना इल्ला व नज़लत अलैहिमुर रहमा व हफ़्फ़त बिहिमुल मलाइकतु वस्तग़फ़रत लहुम इला अन यतफ़र्रक़ू। फ़क़ाल अली इज़न वल्लाहि फ़ुज़ना व फ़ाज़ शिअतुना व रब्बिल कअबा। फ़क़ाल अन्नबी सानिया या अली वल्लज़ी बअसनी बिलहक़्क़ि नबिय्या वस्तफ़ानी बिर्रिसालति नजिय्या मा ज़ुकिरा ख़बरुना हाज़ा फ़ी महफ़िलिन मिन महाफ़िल अहलिल अर्ज़ व फ़ीहि जम्उन मिन शिअतिना व मुहिब्बीना व फ़ीहिम महमूमुन इल्ला व फ़र्रजल्लाहु हम्मा वला मग़मूमुन इल्ला व कशफ़ल्लाहु ग़म्मा वला तालिबु हाजतिन इल्ला व क़ज़ल्लाहु हाजता। फ़क़ाल अली इज़न वल्लाहि फ़ुज़ना व सुइदना व कज़ालिका शिअतुना फ़ाज़ू व सुइदू फ़िद दुनिया वल आखिरति व रब्बिल कअबा। अल्लाहुम्मा सल्लि अला मुहम्मद। मोहम्मद वाले मोहम्मद सल्लल्लाहु। अफ़सोस नबी ज़ादियों का शाम में जाना सज्जाद से पूछो सरनंगे वो माँ बहनों का दरबार में जाना सज्जाद से पूछो छुपती थी नबीज़ादी के पीछे किस शर्मो हया से और शिम्र का उन बीबियों के नाम बताना सज्जाद से पूछो सरनंगे वो माँ बहनों का दरबार में जाना सज्जाद से पूछो बैठे हुए दरबार में सब छोटे बड़े थे और सादात खड़े थे सर तश्त में रखा हुआ ज़ैनब को दिखाना सज्जाद से पूछो जब दुख्तरे शबीर ने जिंदा में क़ज़ा की आफत की घड़ी थी वो नन्ही सी मैयत बंधे हाथों से उठाना सज्जाद से पूछो जब गुस्ल सकीना को वहाँ दे चुकी गुस्सा था सबका बुरा हाल उस नन्ही सी मैयत पे निशान रस्सी के पाना सज्जाद से पूछो सरनंगे वो माँ बहनों का दरबार में जाना सज्जाद से पूछो दुरूद पढ़ दे मोहम्मद वाले
Please, brothers, recite Surah Fatiha for your marhumeen and for the marhumeen of all those mu'mineen mu'minat that do not have anyone to recite Surah Fatiha on their behalf. اللهم اغفرهم وارحمهم واسكنهم بجوار محمد وآل محمد اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله الذي لا يبلغ مدحته القائلون ولا يوصينا معه العادون ولا يؤدي حقه المجتهدون الذي لا يدركه بهد الهمم ولا يناله غوث الفتن الذي ليس لصفته حد محدود ولا نعت موجود ولا وقت محدود ولا أجل ممدود فترى الخلائق بقدرته ونشر الرياح برحمته ووتد بالصخور ميدان أرض ثم الصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين وحبيبنا وحبيب رب العالمين أبي القاسم محمد وعلى أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين واللعن على أدائهم أجمعين من أول يوم ظلمهم إلى قيام يوم الدين. أما بعد، فقال الله سبحانه وتعالى في كتابه المبين وقوله الحق. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. وقال ربكم ادعوني أستجب لكم إن الذين يستكبرون عن عبادتي سيدخلون جهنم داخرين. صدق الله العلي العظيم. اللهم صل على محمد وعلى محمد. Dear brothers, assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. As we said yesterday, inshallah, these few lectures are going to be speaking about Imam Zain al-Abideen alayhi salam and one aspect of his life. Yesterday it was just a historical aspect of his life and what he needed to do in regards to bringing the Shias together. Because we had said that at that time, because Imam Zain al-Abideen wasn't in Medina, there were Shias that started taking other people to be the Imams. Today we want to look at Imam Zain al-Abideen and the du'as that he did. And I said yesterday that when it comes to du'as, many of us, we know what the word means. We do it, but we do it improperly. And when it comes to du'as, the verse of the Quran that I started this lecture off with, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, and your Lord says, call upon me. I will answer you. Surely those who are too proud for my service shall soon enter hell abased. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in this verse, وَقَالَ رَبُّكُمْ أُدْعُونِي أَسْتَجِبْ لَكُمْ. Call upon me, I will surely answer your call. إِنَّ الَّذِينَ يَسْتَكْبِرُونَ عَنْ عِبَادِي. إِنَّ الَّذِينَ يَسْتَكْبِرُونَ عَنْ عِبَادَتِي. Those people that are too proud for my service. Too proud for my service. What does this tell you? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying that if you do not ask me for help, it's telling me what? That you're too proud for my help. You're too proud for my help. Here, ibadati, the word ibadah is used. When you look at the tafsir of this verse, all the aimah, they say that when it comes to this word of the Quran here in this verse, ibadati, it means du'as. It means asking Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying what? He's saying in this verse that those people that are too proud to ask me, to do dua toward me, what will happen to them? سَيَدْخُلُونَ جَهَنَّمَ دَاخِرِينَ. They will surely enter the hellfire abased. They will surely enter the hellfire. Who? The people that do not do dua. The people that do not do dua. They are the ones that will enter the hellfire. So why is there such a punishment for not doing dua? For not doing dua. Why is there such a punishment for not doing dua? Look at what the punishment is. The punishment is hell. Why is that the punishment? Why is the punishment Jahannam for not doing dua? Because you have to remember, what was it that caused Iblis to go from that status that he had to being called la'een? What was it? Pride. What does Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala say in this verse? Those people that are too proud to ask for my help. Those people that are too proud to ask for my help. So when you don't ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for help, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says you have that same type of pride that Iblis lanatullah alayhi had. You have that same pride. And if you think about it, this dua is us basically submitting and saying that yes, there is a higher being above us. It's this dua that lets everyone know that, you know what, not everything is in my control. Yes, I have some things that are in my control, but there are things that are out of my control. And it's for those things that you and I are supposed to do dua for. The fact that this individual, the question I asked was, why is the punishment so severe for not doing dua? That was the question I asked, correct? And that's a legitimate question, is it not? It's a legitimate question. So why is it that when this individual does not even recognize that, yes, you know what, there's some things that I cannot do myself. When this individual gets to that point where he doesn't even recognize that there are some things that I can't do myself, what is this individual going to do? Whatever he wants to accomplish, whatever they want to accomplish, they will try to accomplish that through any means necessary. And you see that in the society that we live in, the red tape that they talk about. If a company cannot do something because of red tape, what do? They bypass it. They bypass it. What do? But they bypass it illegally. They get to do what they want to do illegally. So when it comes to this human being, when there's something this human being is not able to do without the help of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, what are they going to do? They're going to try to bypass that and get to that end goal illegally. Meaning what? Meaning get to that end goal in a sinful manner. In a sinful manner. Because the only thing that's on their mind right now is, you know what? I want that goal. I want to achieve that. That's it. This is the reason Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that those people that do not want my service, in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's eyes, they're considered to be too proud. Because it's that pride that leads them away from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala at the end. It's that pride that led shaitan, iblis, away from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala at the end. So when it comes to du'as aren't something that are just specific to Islam. Du'as aren't something that are just specific to even Shia Islam. Du'as have existed ever since people believed in gods. Not just one God, but gods. That's why you see that are temples that were built. Temples that were built in the past that we've uncovered today. What were those temples used for? They were used for individuals to pray to their gods. They were used for individuals to do dua to their gods. Regardless of whether, yes, those gods were true gods or no, that doesn't matter right now. What we're talking about is the concept of dua. This concept of dua, this concept of dua, it exists in polytheism, it exists in monotheism. This concept that there is a higher being and we should ask that higher being for these things that we cannot achieve on our own, this has nothing to do with monotheism. This has nothing to do with monotheism. Why? Because polytheism has it also. This has to do with theism in general, whether you're polytheistic or you're monotheistic. That doesn't matter. Even polytheists were doing du'as. The Greeks, who were they doing dua to? Yes, the gods, the false gods. The Romans, who were they doing dua to? Yes, those false gods. The Hindus, who were they doing du'as to? Those false gods. Yes, the Meccans in the time of the Holy Prophet, who were they doing dua to? They were using those idols for dua. So dua isn't something specific to Islam. Dua isn't something specific to Shia Islam. But what is specific to Shia Islam is the way that we do dua. The way that we do dua. You see that in all the religions, the invocation, the way that they did dua. For example, in Nabila Musa's time, the Jews, they pray differently. The Christians, they pray differently. The Muslims, we pray differently. All of our prayers are different. Yes, we're asking the same Allah, the same God, but the way that we ask is different. And I said yesterday that we need to speak about how to do dua properly. And there was just something that I said, inshallah, and this is what I want to talk about. When you put out your hands in dua, all of this has a meaning. Depending on what you're asking for, determines how your hand will be in the presence of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Depending on what you're asking for. And inshallah, this is what I want, this hadith I want to read straight from Kafi, where Imam Jafar Sadiq alayhi salam, Allahumma salli ala Muhammadin wa ali Muhammad. There are two narrations from Kafi, the Book of Supplications, the second volume, the Kitab al-Dua, the Book of Supplications. In it, from Abu Abdullah al-Hussein, one of the companions says, I asked about the supplication and raising of the hands. I asked about the supplication and raising of the hands. So he said, it's upon four aspects. The way that you raise your hands, there's four aspects to them. And he goes on to say, as for the seeking of refuge, when you're seeking protection from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, when you're seeking refuge from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, so face the Qibla with the front of your palms up. With the front of your palms up. And then he goes on to say, as for the supplication regarding sustenance, when you want to ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for rizq, for sustenance, extend your palms and display their backs towards the sky. Extend your palms and display your backs toward the backs of the palm towards the sky. And as for the devotion, gesture with your index finger. Devotion. These are all different aspects of dua. All different aspects of devotion. What does devotion mean? Devotion tells you how much you love an individual. How much you love an individual. When I said yesterday that the salams that we recite, we put out our fingers. That is supposed to show devotion. That's what dua is. In this form, when you put out your finger, that's what the Imam is saying. If you want to show devotion, you put out your finger and you ask. So when we say, Assalamu alaikum ya Abu Abdullah, we put out our finger. That putting out the finger is supposed to symbolize devotion. That putting out the finger is supposed to symbolize devotion. But we don't know that. We don't know that. A lot of times we get asked this question, why do you put out the finger? What's the point of that? Because this is a dua. It's supposed to symbolize that devotion, that love you have for the Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam. That's what it's supposed. That's what the Imam is saying. He's saying when you put out your finger, if you want to show that you're devoted to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you want to show devotion and your love for Him, you put out your finger and you ask. And then he goes on to say, and as for the invocation, what does he want you to do? Raise your hands to exceed your head. Meaning what? When you're invoking Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for something that you truly need, raise your hands above your head like this. That's why you see, for example, when it comes to the prayer for rain, where did the narration say to put your hands? Up here like this to your face? No. You're supposed to have your hands out like this. Why? Because you're asking for something that is required. You're asking for something that you need. Without water, what happens to this human being? They're dead. You're asking for something that is required. So what does Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala say? What does Imam Sadiq alayhi salam say? When it comes to that point, if you're asking for invocation, raise out your hands. This is why you see some ulama, they'll raise out their hands. They won't always have it like this when they're doing their du'as. Because they're asking for something specific. Depending on what you're asking for, your hands have to be in a different position. They're not always in the same position. All of these symbolizations, all of these, they have a symbol to them. And that's what we need to understand. If we're doing all of these gestures without knowing what they mean, what result are they going to give us? They're not going to give us a result. For example, in salat, inshallah, one of these days I'll go over salat and what does it mean? What does the ruku mean in salat? The ruku, the act of ruku, what does that mean? Not what we recite in ruku, no, the act of putting your hands on your knees. What does that mean? The qiyam, standing up, what does that mean? The first takbir that you do, what does that takbir mean? In azan, you do 4 takbirs, do you not? Each takbir has a different meaning. It symbolizes something different. Yes, the meaning is Allahu Akbar. But are you just repeating Allahu Akbar 4 times? Or no, is each Allahu Akbar, does it mean something different or it has a different meaning regards to something different? They all have meanings. Every single act that we do for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, they have meanings. When we don't know what those meanings are, then how can we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to fulfill our needs without us fulfilling the needs that He's already, or the requirements that He's set? How can we ask that? That's like asking a teacher or having a professor give you a test, but they haven't even told you what's going to be on the test. They haven't give you anything to look at. They haven't even shown you what will be on the test. They haven't given you any homework to do. They haven't told you what to study. This is why when it comes to these aspects of our rituals, we should know what these rituals mean. Another narration from Imam Sadiq alayhi salam about dua itself. He goes on to say that when it comes to dua, when it comes to desire, when you're desiring something in regards to dua, you extend your hand and display the front part. Like this. Alaykum salam wa rahmatullah. You extend your hand and you display this part. Correct? When it comes to you talking about how the awe of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, what does Imam say? You extend your hand and you display the back part. Yesterday, I talked about how to properly do dua. And that was narration from Imam Sadiq alayhi salam too. What does Imam Sadiq alayhi salam say? He says, look, when you're doing dua, the first thing you need to do is send 3 salawats. After 3 salawats, what should you do? You should extol Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You should talk about His greatness. You should tell Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala how great He is. That's what being in awe of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And Imam Sadiq alayhi salam, he's saying here, when you're talking about the awness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, extend your hands and display the back part. And then he goes on to say, when you're beseeching, you move the right index finger, left and right. And then he goes on to say that when it comes to devotion, you move the left index finger, raising it moderately. Devotion, again, raising the finger in relation to devotion. When we do the ziyarat, we raise our finger, devoted to the Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam. That's what it's supposed to symbolize. And then he goes on to say that when it comes to invoking for something, is that you extend your hand and your forearm towards the sky. And when you come to this point, the Imam, he goes on to say that this is the cause of wailing. When you get to this point where you're raising your hands out into the sky like this, you should wail, you should cry and ask for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for what you want. That's the way dua is supposed to happen. And when you look at the life of Imam Zain al-Abideen al-Islam, you see that he did duas in these ways. When you look at the lives of the Aimah al-Islam, you see that they use all of these ways of doing dua. They would have their hands like this. They would have their hands like this. They would have their hands out. They would have their hands to their face. It wasn't just one time. I know this might be something new to a lot of individuals. They haven't heard this. But in reality, this dua, Amir al-Mu'mineen al-Islam, he says that dua is like a shield. A shield from what? Dua is supposed to be a shield from the calamities that you and I are putting ourselves through every single day. Every single day. The decisions that we make, we don't know the total outcome of that decision. A decision I make today, I could see the result of that decision maybe tomorrow. I could see the result of that decision maybe 10 years from now. I don't know what the result of a decision is going to be. It might look like that decision that I made today in front of me, it's good, but later on down the line, it affects me spiritually. What do I mean? For example, I've applied for a job. The job, it pays very well. It pays better than the job I have right now. If I take the job, I'll get a pay raise. But at the same time, that job is not going to allow me to come to the center. That job is not going to allow me to pray my prayer on time. That job is not going to allow me to practice my religion the way that I'm able to practice my religion with this other job. I made the decision that yes, you know what, for the pay I'll go. But now what's happened? Now I'm not able to practice my religion the way that I was able to practice it before. So you tell me, that decision that I made, was that really beneficial to me or was that detrimental to me at the end? If you think that this world is it, there's nothing beyond this world, then yes, it was beneficial for you. But if you believe that no, there is an afterlife after this world, then you would conclude that no, this decision that I made, it was detrimental to me. Why? Because I'm not able to safeguard my religion the way I was able to do it with that other job. And this is why in the time of the Holy Prophet, one of the companions, they came to the Holy Prophet and they tell him, Ya Rasulullah, can you please pray for me that my sustenance increases? The Holy Prophet, he looked at him and he goes, I'll pray, that's no problem. But just remember, he used to come to Jummah prayers every Friday. He used to come to prayers every Friday in the time of the Holy Prophet. The Holy Prophet says, I'll pray, that's no problem. But make sure once you do get that sustenance, that the religion that you're upon, the way that you are now, make sure that you are still that way. The man, he says, Ya Rasulullah, I will. The Holy Prophet, he prays. The man, he becomes wealthy. The Holy Prophet, he doesn't see him for one Jummah. He doesn't see him for 2 Jummahs. He doesn't see him for 3 Jummahs. He doesn't see him for a while. When he doesn't see him for a while, then he comes one time and the Holy Prophet asks him, what happened to you? I haven't seen you in a long time. The man, he says, Ya Rasulullah, I've had so much wealth, I haven't had time. I haven't had time. That's when the Holy Prophet said, this is what I was scared of. This is what I was warning you about. That once the world comes to you, you're going to forget about the afterlife. And you see that this is what happens to a lot of people. They ask for sustenance, it comes to them, and as soon as it comes to them, they forget about their afterlife. They don't have time for their afterlife. When it comes to these du'as, brothers, sisters, know what you're truly asking for. Know what you're truly asking for. Amir al-Mu'mineen, he says that it might be that you're asking for something and you think it's good for you, but in reality it's bad for you. It might be that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives you something and you think it's bad for you, but in reality it's good for you. And a lot of the times this is what happens. This is exactly what happens. People that come upon money in an instant, they think it's good for them. But then what happens? As soon as they realize that they have to pay taxes, as soon as they realize that they have to pay all the other loans that by the time they're done, they have no money. For example, lottery winners. As soon as they get their millions, what happens to them? They've forgotten everyone. They've forgotten family. They've forgotten religion. They've forgotten everything. The only thing they know now is they're rich. That's it. They've forgotten everything else. The only thing they know is money. And the other way also. People that were rich complete, they were rich beyond any one of our imaginations. When they lose it all, there's very few people in the world, when they lose everything, they still rely on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to get them back to where they were. There's very few people. But the majority of them, when they lose it, what do? They're completely out. This is why we have to remember what we're asking for. And when you look at Imam Zain al-Abideen al-Islam and you look at the du'as that he did, what kind of du'as? Was he asking for sustenance? Yes, he was asking for sustenance. But when it came to his children, was he asking Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to increase them in their wealth? No, he wasn't. The way that he would do dua for his children, if you pick up Sayfa Sajadiyah and read the dua that Imam has in regards to children, the way that he used to supplicate for the children, what does the Imam say? The Imam says, Ya Allah, make their morals better. Make their morals better. Not increase their wealth. No, make their morals better. Ya Allah, make them a strength for me. Make them a strength for me. How many of the parents pray for their children in that way? No. Some of the parents, what do they pray for? Ya Allah, make my daughter, make my son a doctor. Ya Allah, make my son, make my daughter an engineer. It doesn't matter if they're a doctor, but if their morals are low, them being a doctor is not going to matter in the akhirah. It doesn't matter if they're an engineer, but if their morals are low, their engineering is not going to matter in the akhirah. This is why even the Quran, even the Holy Prophet, he says what? That I came last as prophet to what? To increase people in their wealth? No, he came last as prophet to take people higher in regards to their morals. This is why Imam Zain al-Abideen is asking Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to increase them in their morals, making his children's morals better. Why? Because when it comes to morals, the society that you and I live in is dependent on our morals, dependent on the individual's morals. If every individual has the same morals as the Imam, every Shia, forget everyone else, if every Shia living today has the same morals as the Imam, would there be bickering amongst the Shias? Would there be fighting amongst the Shias? No, there wouldn't. But what has truly happened? I'm not looking at all of Islam. If I was to look at all of Islam, I would say that if every Muslim was to have the same morals as the Holy Prophet, the same Prophet that every Muslim believe in, if they were to have the same morals as the Holy Prophet, would there be bickering amongst the Muslims? No, there wouldn't. Would there be fighting amongst the Muslims? No, there wouldn't. If they truly had the same morals, but they don't. What's happened? They've gotten their morals from other individuals. They've gotten their morals from the society that they live in. They've gotten their morals from themselves. When it comes to Imam Zain al-Abideen, when it comes to du'as itself, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, my Lord would not have cared were it not for your prayers. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran that I would not have cared for you if it was not for your prayers. Meaning what? Meaning that the du'as that we do, it is only and only because of those du'as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala cares for us. It's only and only because of those du'as. And some people might be thinking, well, there are people that don't do du'a. Why is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala care for them? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala cares for them. Why? Because even though they don't do du'a with their tongue, you have to understand that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran, يُسَبِّحُ لِلَّهِ مَا فِي السَّمَاوَاتِ وَمَا فِي الْأَرْضِ. Everything that is in the earth and the heavens, they praise the Lord of the world. Everything. That means that these cells that we have in our body, what are they truly doing? They're praising Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It's because these cells are praising Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala cares for us. Even though our tongue does not do dua for Allah. Even though we don't have dua on our tongues. It's these cells that are in our bodies that are actually praising Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Salli ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. When it comes to du'as, one of the reasons people get dejected is because they don't get accepted. And they don't get accepted, like I said, they don't know how to do du'a properly. For example, a du'a is said to be recited in the morning, before Fajr, for example. A du'a is said to be recited during Sahri, for example. A du'a is said to be recited midnight, for example. And they don't recite it at their correct time. They recited, you know what, it's dua, I can recite it whenever I want. Yes, you can recite dua whenever you want, but you have to remember that there's some places in this world which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has sanctified. And He says that if you do dua in these places, there's more chance of it to be accepted. Just as there's some places in this world that are sanctified, there's some times in the day where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, if you do dua in this time, your dua is more likely to be accepted. There's some times. There's a place and a time. And what happens a lot of the time? We don't do dua at the right time. We don't do dua at the right time. What's another problem? We don't do dua the way that it's supposed to be done. Meaning what? Meaning a zikr, for example, is supposed to be recited 30 times. We'll recite it 40 times. Oh, extra credit. Right? That's the way a lot of us think, extra credit. But you have to remember that when it comes to these types of du'as, these types of zikrs, if it's said recited 30 times, that means that whatever fruit that you're looking for, it is at 30 times. That's it. Whatever fruit. This is like you being given a map. a treasure map. The treasure map, it tells you that, hey, the treasure that you're looking for is 50 feet from where you are. 50 feet. If you go 51 feet and you start digging, will you find the treasure? No, you won't. If you go 49 feet and you start digging, will you find the treasure? No, you won't. Where will you find the treasure? At 50 feet. Do the same when it comes to these dhikrs. If it's saying to do it 30 times, do it 30 times. Don't do it 35 times. Don't do it 36 times. And this is what a lot of us do. 30 times. We'll do it 100 times. Do it multiples of 30. Yes. Multiples of 30. That's fine. Multiples of 40 if it's 40 times. Multiples of 70 if it's 70 times. But don't do an odd number. When you do it 30 times, the fruit that was there for you doing it 30 times, you've met it. Now, if you want that fruit again, what are you going to have to do? You're going to have to do it 30 times again. That repetition is in that amount of times. But many of us, we don't do that. We'll do it 35 times, extra credit. That's not how the du'as work. You'll get the sawab for it. But if you're asking Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for sustenance, for example, and it says that to recite this dua 5 times, recite it 5 times. If it says recite it 5 times during Fajr, recite it 5 times during Fajr. Don't do it during Maghrib. Why? Because like I said, there's a time for those du'as to be accepted. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. The Quran itself, Surah Al-Baqarah, verse number 216, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that it may be that you dislike a thing while it's good for you, and it may be that you love a thing while it's evil for you. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows while you do not know. And you see that this is true a lot of the times. There's so many things that we love, but in reality, it's not good for us. In reality, it's not good for us. And there's so many things that we dislike, but in reality, it's good for us. What do I mean? If you look at a butterfly, when a butterfly wants to get out of its cocoon, what does it have to do? It has to basically make a hole in the cocoon, and it uses its wings to get out of that cocoon. If you were to cut that cocoon and let the butterfly out, that butterfly would die. Do you know why that is? Because the reason it's getting or trying to split the cocoon with its wings, it's making the wings stronger. If you look into biology, if you look into a butterfly, when it's trying to get out of that cocoon and using its wings, it's making the wings stronger so it could use the wings to fly. If I was to see that and I say that, hey, you know what, this butterfly, it's suffering, and I was just to go cut the cocoon, it'd come out, but it wouldn't be able to fly. It looks like that suffering is bad, but in reality, that suffering is good for the butterfly. What is it doing? It's making the wings stronger. And it's the same case with the human beings. Sometimes we go through suffering, but that suffering makes us stronger. It doesn't weaken us. We might see it, that, you know what, this is weakening me, but no, it makes an individual stronger. This is why sometimes we go through a lot of hardships in our life. And you have to remember, the more hardships an individual goes through, the more Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala loves that individual. The more hardships. And this is why there are no individuals that have gone through hardships more than the Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam. No individual, no prophet before the Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam. No individual after them. Look at what happened with the Holy Prophet. Look at what happened with Amir al-Mu'mineen. Look at what happened with Abu Abdullah Hussain alayhi salam. No individual went through more hardships than the Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam. This is the reason Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala loves them the most. Why? Because they faced these difficulties, they faced these hardships. And what happened to them? Did they lose faith in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? No, they did not. Their faith in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala grew stronger. It was through these hardships that you see that du'as came to their aid. What was Lady Zainab salawatullahi alaiha, she was doing? What was she doing after Karbala? Was it just prayers? No, it was du'as also. Imam Zain al-Abideen, was it just prayers? No, it was du'as also. What were the shuhada of Karbala doing the night of Ashur? Was it just prayers? No, it was du'as also. It was du'as also. But what were they asking for, and what do you and I ask for when it comes to du'as? When it comes to those 70, they asked for something different. When it comes to you and I, we ask for a bigger house. We ask for a better car. We ask for more money. If one of us is more of a mu'min, what do we ask for? For example, Ya Allah, I wish I was in Karbala in the time of Abu Abdullah Hussain alayhi salam. I wish I was in Karbala. There's a story in regards to this where an alim, he kept saying, I wish I was in Karbala. I would have given my life for Imam Hussain alayhi salam. And he does Amal Ashur for 40 nights. Amal Ashur for 40 nights. Once he was done with that, then he sees Abu Abdullah Hussain in his dream, and he says to him, Imam Hussain, he's looking at him, and he says to him, you wish you were in Karbala with me? He goes, Yabna Rasulullah, of course. I would sacrifice my life for you. Imam hears this, and he says to him, okay, you sacrifice your life for me? Okay, no problem. Look, all I'm going to do is I'm going to pray. I'm going to pray. I just want you to stand in front of me and take the arrows that are going to come my way. I just want you to stand in front of me and take the arrows that are going to come my way. He goes, Ibn Rasulullah, no problem. He goes, okay. Imam Hussain, he starts his takbir. As soon as he starts his takbir, he says his takbir, an arrow comes from the side of the Yazidi army. This alim, he sees the arrow come, he moves out of the way. He moves out of the way, Abu Abdullah Hussain he gets hit. He gets hit. Another arrow comes, the man, he moves out of the way. Abu Abdullah Hussain gets hit. He moves out of the way a third time. Imam Hussain he gets hit. Imam Hussain he finishes his prayer. When he finishes his prayer, he looks at this alim and he says, I thought you said that you were willing to give your life for me. Look, do not ever compare yourself to these 72. Do not ever compare yourself to these 72. One of the individuals that was taking arrows for Imam Hussain alayhi salam, who was he? His name was Sa'id. He was 90 years old. 90 years old. This alim, he's not even 60. Imam Hussain alayhi salam is telling this alim, do not ever compare yourself to these individuals. Why? Because these individuals were truly ready to give their life for me. Truly ready. If an alim who's supposed to be the greatest amongst us, Shias, greatest amongst the Shias, if their heart starts to waver when this arrow comes at them, how will you and I be? We all say the same thing, do we not? Labbaik ya Imam. Labbaik ya Imam. We're all calling Imam Zaman. If that was Imam Zaman who tells us, you've called me, now I'm going to pray, I want you to stand in front of me and take a bullet for me. How many of us would be able to take the bullet? Many of us would, yes, we'll take a bullet. But when the time comes and the test comes, that's when you'll realize whether or not you were a true Shia of the Ahlul Bayt or you were just someone who was giving lip service. That's when you and I will realize. When it comes to these du'as, one of the best du'a that you can do is to ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, yes, to ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to hasten the reappearance of Imam Zaman. But one of the best du'as that you can do for yourself is to make your heart stronger so that you can devote yourself to Imam Zaman when he comes. So you can devote yourself to Imam Zaman when he comes. So when he tells you to take a bullet for him, you don't waver. When he tells you to do something, you don't say, Mawla, but. And this has happened in the time of the Imams, where people were questioning the Imams. Shias questioning the Imams. And when Imam Zaman appears, there'll be Shias that are going to question him too. Shia ulama that are going to question the Imam. Leave alone, people like you and I, ulama that are going to question the Imam. Why? All their life they were asking for the Imam to come. But they never asked Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to give them a heart which will accept the Imam when he comes. All their life they asked Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to hasten the rear prince of Imam Zaman, but they never asked Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Ya Allah, make me subservient to them. Make my head bow down to whatever they want. They never asked for that. And because they don't ask for that, when the Imam comes, you see the narrations where he's going to start from within. He's going to start the revolution from within Islam. When he gets to Kufa, you think it's just the Sufyani and his army that he's going to kill? No. No. It's ulama also. It's ulama. So salli ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. When it comes to dua, the main objective of dua and its reward, it lies in that it's a divine mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. A lot of people, we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala thinking that He's a genie. He'll give us whatever we wish for. That's not how du'as work. That's not how du'as work. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He knows better what's best for you. He knows better than you about what's best for you. Sometimes what does He do? He refrains from giving to you when you want. Why? Because you're not ready for it. You're not ready for it. You're asking for $1 million, but you're not ready for $1 million. You're asking for a bigger house, but you're not ready for a bigger house. You're not ready for that. As soon as you get it, it's going to disappear. You're not ready for it. So what does Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala do? He waits. What is He waiting for? He's waiting for you to ask Him to get you ready for that. They're preparatory steps that you need to take. And we don't take those preparatory steps. We want that end goal without taking the steps to get there. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala Himself, Imam Sadiq alayhi salam, he says that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will answer the prayers of an individual as long as they don't determine when that prayer should be answered. When that prayer should be answered. Meaning what? Meaning, Ya Allah, I want you to do this now. Ya Allah, I want you to do this by tomorrow. Sometimes we have this idea, Ya Allah, do this right now. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is not your servant, you're His servant. This is something that everyone needs to understand. You're His servant. When you're His servant, He will do it when He sees fit, not when you want Him to do it. And people don't understand this. When it comes to Imam Zain al-Abideen, when it comes to his du'as, look at the dua that he says in regards to children. When it comes to his du'as and his parents, he says, in the dua, he says, Ya Allah, whatever bad deeds I've done against my parents, whatever bad deeds that I've done against my parents, Ya Allah, turn those bad deeds of mine into good deeds for them. Turn those bad deeds of mine into good deeds for them. This is the way Imam is praying for the parents. This is the way. You look at the way the Imam is praying for neighbors, for example. You look at the way Imam, forget Muslims, just other human beings. Just other human beings. Other human beings. Not just Shias, other Muslims, for example. The way the Imam prays for other Muslims. How many of us pray for others like that? What's happening in, for example, Palestine? Yes, it's atrocious what's happening in Palestine right now. It's absolutely abominable. And we should pray to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Whatever is happening there, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, His justice that He talks about, the justice of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, may it enlighten the whole world. And that justice of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is Imam Zaman. What's happening in Palestine is going to happen in Palestine. This is supposed to happen until the zuhur of Imam Zaman alayhi salam. The conflict of Palestine that's happening, it's not something that you and I can get rid of. No, that's something that the Imam will take care of. That's something the Imam will take care of. But there's one thing that I need to say, that there are people today that are saying that, hey, you know what, Palestine, and they're comparing it to what happened in Karbala. Comparing Palestine to Karbala. You have to remember that this is actually detrimental to Shia Islam. You have to remember, comparing Palestine to Karbala, where did this come from? Palestine, what is Palestine? Palestine is an argument, is a fight over land. That's what Palestine is. Was Karbala a fight over land that you're comparing the two now? Do you not understand that Karbala was between good, you yourself say Karbala was between good and evil. Is Palestine between good and evil, or is it between land? It's over land. So why compare Palestine to Karbala? The second most atrocious incident that happened in the life of the Ahlul Bayt, it was known as the Battle of Fakh. Marakatul Fakh, please read up on it. Imam Jawad alayhi salam, he says that after the event of Karbala, if there's an incident that has harmed us the most after the event of Karbala, it's this battle. It's this battle. The Imam never compares it to Karbala. He says after Karbala. Yet you have Shias that are comparing what's happening to Palestine to Karbala. For what? There is no comparison there to begin with, brother and sister. I'm sorry, there's no comparison there. If you want to compare what's happening in Palestine, compare it to what the Nazis did to the Jews back in the 1930s, 1940s. Compare it. You'll see that it's the exact same thing. The exact same thing. It's not right to compare Palestine to Karbala. It's absolutely wrong. This phrase of Kullu Yawmin Ashura, Kullu Arzin Karbala, this phrase is not a hadith. It's not a hadith. Yes, there are people that attribute to Imam Sadiq alayhi salam, but Imam Sadiq alayhi salam, there's no narration with this kind when it comes to Imam Sadiq alayhi salam. Kullu Yawmin Ashura, this first phrase and the second phrase after it, this is contradictory to Shia belief. How's Kullu Yawmin Ashura? Imam Hassan alayhi salam, after he drank that poison, what does he say to Imam Hussain alayhi salam is crying over Imam Hassan. He's crying over Imam Hassan. Imam Hassan alayhi salam, he's crying and he says, what? La yawm ka yawmaka ya Aba Abdullah. There is no day like your day, ya Aba Abdullah. If the day that Imam Hassan alayhi salam was shaheed, if that day itself is not the equivalent to the 10th of Muharram, then how is what's happening in Palestine equivalent to what happened in the 10th of Muharram? How? When it comes to Karbala, and you look at the hadith about the significance of Karbala, the land of Karbala, how holy the land of Karbala is. Kullu Arzin Karbala? Every land is Karbala. Is every land that holy? No, it's not. But this phrase got taken out of context. This phrase, it got taken out of context, and because it got taken out of context, it got used in all of these places. When in reality, this phrase itself is absolutely contradictory. If you look at it from that aspect, it's absolutely contradictory to Shia belief. There is no day like Ashur. There is no land like Karbala. To compare what happened to Karbala, or to compare what happened in Karbala to what happened in Palestine, this is absolutely wrong. This is absolutely wrong. What happened in Karbala? You look at the 10th of Muharram. Imam Hussain alayhi salam, after his shahadat, the army of Yazid, what did they do? Some of the narrations, they state that after Imam Hussain was shaheed, Umar Saad, he sees that Imam Hussain alayhi salam, he's on the floor, he's on the ground, but he didn't know whether or not he was shaheed or not. He didn't know that if he was shaheed yet. And they were scared to go close to him. When they were scared to go close to him, Umar Saad, he says, look, there's only one way that we can find out or we can know whether or not he's shaheed or not. And they ask him, what is that? And he says, look, yell out as loud as you can that the tents are being looted. Yell out as loud as you can that we're going to attack the women and children. And then we'll truly find out whether he has been killed or he hasn't. When they yell out that we're going to go loot the tents, the narrations state that Imam Hussain alayhi salam, he gets up. He gets up and he says to the army of Yazid, I'm still alive. As long as I'm alive, you will not harm the women and children that are there. As long as I'm alive, you will not harm the women and children that are there. That's when they come, and that's when they finally martyr Abu Abdullah al-Hussein al-Islam. After they martyred Imam Hussein al-Islam, what do they say? Is there anyone that's willing to trample his body? If there are any individuals that are willing to trample his body, I'm ready to give them a reward. Sallallahu alayka ya Rasulallah. Sallallahu alayka ya Amir al-Mu'mineen. Sallallahu alayka ya Siddiqatu Fatima. Sallallahu alayka ya Hasan al-Mujtaba. Sallallahu alayka ya Gharib al-Ghuraba. Ya Aba Abdullah al-Hussein. Brothers and sisters, it's Asra Ashur. Imam Hussein al-Islam, he's already been martyred. When they announced that we'll give a reward for anyone that's willing to trample the body of Abu Abdullah al-Hussein al-Islam, the narration state that there were 10 soldiers that stood up, and these 10 soldiers, they did not just have Arabian horses. They had horses that were stronger than Arabian horses. These horses, they were used to till the grounds. These horses, they weren't Arabian horses, they were brought from outside of Arabia. And it was these 10 horses that were used to trample over the body of Abu Abdullah al-Hussein al-Islam. After his shahadat, after the head of Imam Hussein has been severed, that's when they go and they start to burn down the tents of Lady Zainab and the tents of Abu Abdullah al-Hussein al-Islam. The narrations, they state that when they would burn one tent, the women, they would run into another tent, they'd burn the other tent, the women, they'd run into another tent. Finally, they get into the tent of Imam Zain al-Abideen. That's when Lady Zainab, she looks at Imam Zain al-Abideen and she asks him, Ya Sayyid al-Sajjad, you're the Imam of the time now. Tell us, what should we do? Should we stay in these tents and should we all burn alive, or should we all leave out of these tents? That when Imam Zain al-Abideen, he cries and he says, oh auntie dear, everyone needs to disperse out of these tents. When everyone goes out of the tents, the narration said that all the children, they went one way, some of the children went a different way. Lady Zainab, brother and sister, she's looking for all the children. She's found all the children, but there's only one child that's been missing. And what child is that? That is Sakina. What has happened to Sakina? When she's run out, it's Sham Ghariban, she's run out. Hamid ibn Muslim, he says that he sees this child come towards him. When he sees the child, he goes up and he says, he goes close to the child. When he goes close to the child, this child, she puts her hands together and she says, oh kind sir, I don't have anything else anymore. They've already taken away my jewelry, the earrings that I had. They snatched them out of my ears. Whatever I had around my wrist, they took them off. Whatever I had around my ankles, they took them all off. Hamid ibn Muslim, he says that, oh my little daughter, I'm not here to take anything from you. All I want to do is put out the fire that's on your clothes. When he puts out the fire, this little girl, she puts her hands together and she says to him, oh kind sir, thank you for what you've done. I want to ask you for another favor. Can you tell me the direction to Najaf? That's when he asked, why do you want to go to Najaf? Because my grandfather Ali is in Najaf. I'm going to complain to him about what these people did to my father. He says that Najaf is that one. When he points her to the direction of Najaf, she goes a little bit. When she goes a little bit, Hamid ibn Muslim, he says that he sees an individual come from Najaf. When this individual comes, he gets off his horse and he takes this little girl into his lap. When he takes this little girl into his lap, he asks her, oh my daughter, where are you going? I'm going to Najaf. Why are you going to Najaf? Because my grandfather Ali is in Najaf. This man, he says, may your grandfather be sacrificed for you. At this time, Lady Zainab, she has come. When she sees this man holding this little girl, she looks at him and she says, oh kind sir, thank you for finding this daughter. This was the most beloved of Hussein ibn Ali. I found all the children. This is the only child that was left. That's when this man, he puts the child down and he says just one time, he says Zainab. When he says Zainab, Lady Zainab, she looks away and she says, oh man, how do you know who I am? That's when this man, he says, oh my daughter Zainab. When he says, oh my daughter Zainab, Zainab looks and she sees her father and she cries out, oh father dear, now you have come. I kept calling you when they martyred Ali al-Akbar, you did not come. I kept calling you when they martyred Abu al-Fazl, you did not come. I kept calling you when they martyred Abu Abdullah, you did not come. Inna lillah wa inna ilayhi raji'un wa la'natullah ala qawmil kafirin. Matam Hussein.
Hussain, Ya Hussain, Ya Hussain,
Ya Hussain, Ya Hussain, Ya Hussain, Ya Hussain, Ya Hussain, Ya Hussain, Ya Hussain, Ya Hussain, Ya Hussain, Ya Hussain, Ya Hussain, Ya Hussain, Ya Hussain, Ya Hussain, Ya Hussain. कूफे का और शाम का मंजर, कूफे का और शाम का मंजर, याद जब आ जाता है बाबा, दिल मेरा फट जाता है बाबा। कूफे का और शाम का मंजर, कूफे का और शाम का मंजर, कूफे का और शाम का मंजर। एक रस्म में बंधे छोटे बड़ों के गले, एक रस्म में बंधे छोटे बड़ों के गले, बरसरे दरबार सब इस तरह लाए गए, बरसरे दरबार सब इस तरह लाए गए। फोटो से बरसाते थे पत्थर, याद जब आ जाता है बाबा, दिल मेरा फट जाता है बाबा। कूफे का और शाम का मंजर, कूफे का और शाम का मंजर, कूफे के बाजार में मजमाए कुफार में, कूफे के बाजार में मजमाए कुफार में, एक तमाशा सा था आले सितमकार में, एक तमाशा सा था आले सितमकार में। ऐसे में माँ बहन खुले सर, याद जब आ जाता है बाबा, दिल मेरा फट जाता है बाबा। कूफे का और शाम का मंजर, कूफे का और शाम का मंजर, खौफ से हरगिज़ न था बाबा मेरा सर झुका, खौफ से हरगिज़ न था बाबा मेरा सर झुका। हथकड़ी और टेढ़ी का कोई मुझे गम न था, हथकड़ी और टेढ़ी का कोई मुझे गम न था। देखा नहीं जाता था मंजर, याद जब आ जाता है बाबा, दिल मेरा फट जाता है बाबा। कूफे का और शाम का मंजर, कूफे का और शाम का मंजर। बाली सकीना का गम दिल ये नहीं भूलता, सकीना का गम दिल ये नहीं भूलता। सबके निशाने बंधे इसका बंधा था गला, सबके निशाने बंधे इसका बंधा था गला। दर्द से वो रहती थी मुस्तर, याद जब आ जाता है बाबा, दिल मेरा फट जाता है बाबा। कूफे का और शाम का मंजर, कूफे का और शाम का मंजर, कूफे का और शाम का मंजर। या हुसैन, या हुसैन, या हुसैन, या हुसैन, या हुसैन,
या हुसैन, या हुसैन, या हुसैन, या हुसैन। जब मुझे आपके कातिल ने है मारा बाबा, जब मुझे आपके कातिल ने है मारा बाबा। हर तमाचे पे सकीना ने, हर तमाचे पे सकीना ने पुकारा बाबा। जब मुझे आपके कातिल ने है मारा बाबा, जब मुझे आपके कातिल ने है मारा बाबा। मुझे आपके कातिल ने है मारा बाबा, जब मुझे आपके कातिल ने है मारा बाबा। वो जो दुनिया आपने तोहफे में मुझे बख्शे थे, वो जो दुनिया आपने तोहफे में मुझे बख्शे थे, उनको बेदर्दी से जालिम ने, उनको बेदर्दी से जालिम ने उतारा बाबा, जब मुझे आपके कातिल ने है मारा बाबा, जब मुझे आपके कातिल ने है मारा बाबा। नौके नेज़ा पे उसे देखूं तो देखूं कैसे, नौके नेज़ा पे उसे देखूं तो देखूं कैसे। मेरा असगर था मुझे जासे, मेरा असगर था मुझे जासे भी प्यारा बाबा, जब मुझे आपके कातिल ने है मारा बाबा, जब मुझे आपके कातिल ने है मारा बाबा। साथ रहमारों के दोहराया गया है मुझको, साथ रहमारों के दोहराया गया है मुझको। चूर जख्मों से बदन मेरा, चूर जख्मों से बदन मेरा है सारा बाबा, जब मुझे आपके कातिल ने है मारा बाबा। या हुसैन, या हुसैन, या हुसैन, या हुसैन, या हुसैन, या हुसैन।
अस्सलामु अलैकुम या रसूल अल्लाह, अस्सलामु अलैकुम या अमीर अल-मोमिनीन, अस्सलामु अलैकुम या सिद्दीक़त फ़ातिमत ज़हरा सय्यदत निसाइल आलमीन, अस्सलामु अलैकुम या हसनुल मुज्तबा, अस्सलामु अलैकुम या गरीबुल ग़ुरबा या अबा अब्दुल्लाह, अस्सलामु अलैकुम या अली इब्न अल-हुसैन, अस्सलामु अलैकुम या मुहम्मद इब्न अली, अस्सलामु अलैकुम या जाफ़र इब्न मुहम्मद, अस्सलामु अलैकुम या मूसा इब्न जाफ़र, अस्सलामु अलैकुम या अली इब्न मूसा, अस्सलामु अलैकुम या मुहम्मद इब्न अली, अस्सलामु अलैकुम या अली इब्न मुहम्मद, अस्सलामु अलैकुम या हसन इब्न अली, अस्सलामु अलैकुम या साहिबुल अशर ज़मान, अलमान 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 मिनल फितन ज़मान, अजलल्लाहु तआला फरजक व ज़हूरक वजअलना मिन अंसारिक व रहमतुल्लाहि व बरकातुहू।
दायरा बना लो, पीछे दायरा बना लो। बिस्मिल्लाह।
बिस्मिल्लाह